And then great airline, James needs to, they're very nice. They don't really have functionality. Now it's let's start here. Yeah. Now realize it.
Wà lọ́wọ́ ọmọ yẹn wà bẹ́ẹ̀.
Start. Didn't leave.
Ó wà bẹ́ẹ̀. Àfọ́nì ṣe o.
What are so much you want? Surprise.
So I can.
Inside.
Thank you. So the flash drive.
You don't have internet.
No, internet. The internet will get me on download the email on time.
Try my phone.
Oh, just.
Are you sure?
Only flash drive. So.
Oh, okay. But download the last email again, okay?
No, he has it on his laptop.
Oh, okay.
If you send it to the email, I will check download this.
Yes. I think I saw it.
Have you downloaded?
I think I should be able to.
Because networks might be quite. I mean, you can't predict how network. Yeah, maybe you should download it now.
But the network vanish. I'm sure the phone.
You just said how use the phone to send it here.
Like really, those spots in case the network vanish.
What network are you using?
Let's see.
The same as your earphones. Yes.
5G.
No.
Only 5G.
Also, my presentation is on my computer.
Do you want to join panel bars on the computer?
That works. I brought HDMI cord.
It depends on your internet. Because I will have to. Okay, can I shift? Is it on your flash drive?
It won't work on the PC. Well, let me see.
Yeah.
Am I the first student? There's no way
Is
to
it,
join. Let me see if I
because
can
last
make
time, how would you travel?
Sure. Okay, so
I don't know because it was on my laptop here.
so this is the okay. Let me see if I can make it a PowerPoint. Then maybe I'll copy. Do you still need the flash drive?
Yes. You can just copy it on the flash drive. I can.
Or if I join on Zoom, what about the echo? I just have to mute myself.
You have to mute yourself.
Wi-Fi.
This is my Wi-Fi, and if you want to connect now, you can connect.
I have got data on my.
Sorry. See. Okay. Set the phone on as flash drive. Good morning. Hope you have a good reception. Okay.
Except I only have one bar, so I don't have the sheet.
One bar, like. Okay. I didn't really. Well, let me show you something.
Yeah, I don't have a lot of signal. So
If you
okay. Yes, if you don't mind.
That's it. It's on the key.
I'll just take a picture. But meanwhile, I'll see if I can make it a PowerPoint.
Mm-hmm. Then if not, well, the way we said it, you have to join it. Then you need your. This will capture your voice actually. Everything well. Bye bye. No,
That's the name of the part.
video. Okay. No, you can delete it. Oh, okay. Ah. Sorry, please. I copied it here and I'm expecting it. I can't find it. I think I was supposed to have. Oh, yeah, leave back. Let me send it again. I'm sorry. It's about searching. I put it on the screen. Yeah, that's what I.
The about search file
Folder.
yeah, no.
I didn't put it in a file folder.
No matter. So
Should be here. I put it on the desktop.
so
Yeah, it's here.
maybe one of those laptop is one of those that to hide some.
Yeah, okay. I have it now already. Thank you. Man, chef, share ni. I just allowed you to share. Huh? Oh, no, just have authorized it. So you can't because I'm sharing now.
So
Then I have to stop this first. Okay. Just about. Ó wà ní bẹ́ẹ̀ Esther.
Well,
Kì í ṣe
No, or at least start.
So run about time.
One minute.
Bankole, sorry, can I have it? Just check.
So he's not for research about research. Agile. So it's obviously agile students would be so if it's relevant to sometimes.
No pressure, yeah, no pressure at all.
Where? Never done. Great. That's
Okay, 5G.
How many bars do you have? How many bars do you have? Just one. Four bars. I'm just trying to see if I should connect.
Your laptop?
My office connected. I should try to connect to.
Ma, yeah, I think the network draws so much for the Zoom rather than any other thing else. Yeah.
Let's see what the next to.
Okay, I think it's working now. Yes. Thank you, sir.
You don't. Very good. I think it should. So. So I think we'll start now. See if more people join us. So good morning and welcome to the third part of this series of stimulating panels and bodies, artistic expressions and identities, entitled of streets and streeters. My name is Tolu Opera. I am an assistant professor of African literature and cultures at the University of British Columbia, and it is my pleasure to share the stage with these wonderful speakers today. So over the past 2 days, scholars have examined questions related to urban space, self-presentation, and the micropolitics of urban life in Lagos and elsewhere. This final part of this series features 3 scholars. More scholars will be one of whom will not be here, but 3 scholars whom I will now proceed to introduce to you. So this is my father. It's Dr. Adelus, who is an associate professor of history at Howard University. She is the author of Imagine Lagos, Mapping History, Place and Politics in the 19th Century African City. Today she delivers a paper entitled Citing Reclamation to Place and History in Old Lagos. Next will be Abidin K. Amudu, who's a doctoral researcher and an HD art scholar at the Institute for Social Science Research at the University of Queensland in Australia. He is currently studying Black queer African migration to Australia. And his paper today is entitled Whose Right to the City, Streets, and Surveillance of Queer Bodies in Nigeria. Last but not least is the convener of this panel himself, Bankole Wright, who is a doctoral candidate in anthropology at Florida International University. Wright's research on Lagos streets politics has received generous funding, most recent of which is a grand dissertation grant. His paper today is entitled Beyond Perilous Masculinities, Rethinking Urban Male Streeters in Lagos. We will proceed now as ordered in the conference schedule, starting with Dr. Adeleke at the
Thank you so much. This makes set up for time. So. All right. Good morning, everyone. Thank you for being here. You know, it's early Saturday morning from the last day of the conference. I learned my paper is emotions. All right. So I share my screen. I used to share it.
Yes, it's there. Like you're sharing.
It's not showing over here. I'll stop and I'll start again. Yeah. Yeah. Double click. There it is. Because I shared, but yeah, this is mine. I share. It says my I said it's screen share. You know what? That. Okay. Okay. Right in house. Very good. Okay, very good. All right, thank you, everyone. Thank you to our April IC support. Always be there, but for the pitch. All right, in that case, I'll speak very quickly. On my slide on the screen. So my presentation is titled, as you can see, Reviving Reclamation Road, Streets and History with Old Lagos. So as a tradition, I'm a historian of Lagos, I call myself a historian of Old Lagos. It's to me, it is the 19th century. My book is about 19th century, but I've been thinking increasingly about how to bridge the 19th and 20th century spatial history. So my book, Imagine Lagos, is one that thinks carefully about the question of how do you create a project that puts history, streets, narrative, map-making, and activities and digital humanities into the same framework. And really interested in thinking about, cannot hear me. Okay, very good. I'm really interested in my research on Lagos in thinking about ways that we can make the city more recognizable. So for someone like myself who grew up in Lagos and came to history after being more on the science side of things, when I was reading histories of Lagos in 20th century, 19th century, one of the things that I encountered is that we don't recognize Lagos. It's as if it's a featureless blank space. I say this every time I present. You know, it's almost as if the cultural, historical action is happening in a blank space. So part of what I do in my work and why the book is called Imagine Lagos is really about thinking about bringing back this sense of the history of the city, thinking about bringing back, I mean, all of us have been here a few days at least now. So, you know, this energy, this excitement, the danger, the sense of urgency, the opportunities, these are feelings, these are experiences that are historical. Right. And I always use this newspaper article from this quote from 1882, where this editor describes Lagos, even in 1882, that he writes, "You forget that Lagos has what England has not. We have a climate, as we can feel. You know, it rained very heavily overnight. And I was hoping it wouldn't disturb us today." But to complete the quote, because our city is comprised of equal parts of sunshine, mosquitoes, sand, high temperature, sweetness, light, sound, fury, rain, rage, retribution, and that sort of thing. So I'm really interested in how can we bring this feeling of the city into the narratives that we tell about the 19th century? How can we recognize, historicize, and imagine this history of people and the city of Lagos, spatially and in terms of people as well? One of the things that's really important to me, my next slide will show you, is thinking about more of the population. Lagos has been a very dense space, at least the old city has been a very dense space for a very long time. If we think about, the top image on the left is from the 1890s. By 2015, these images are taken in approximately the same area. Part of what I'm thinking about in my own work is how can we narrate the histories of African cities that reflect the experiences of more of the population? So a lot of times we have populations of elite figures, you know, figures who are wealthy, educated, maybe they're Christian, maybe they're Muslim. But what I'm really thinking about in my own work is thinking about more of the city. How can we bring more people into the conversation about history? So when Bankole brought up these ideas around streets and streeters, I found a real, oh, this. Thank you. I found that in my own work, because I'm really interested in the histories of streets and streets as an archive, I found that my own work had a good synergy with this, and we've been working through this for a few years. So part of what I'm doing today is something a little bit different from usual. I'm thinking about the 20th century. One of the things you find about the spatial history of Lagos, especially starting from Eko itself, Lagos Island, is that this city has a history of reclamation. Because originally Lagos was filled with mangroves, swamps, large parts of the city were not inhabitable. Well, the map that will come up next will show you the reclamation of the city. Part of what we've seen in the last 150 to 175 years is all sorts of attempts to reclaim land and space in Lagos. So you see that the parts, you see as the city begins to expand from the Lagos Island core, what we really have here is a city, some people, there's a book, Sandbank City, this is a city of sand filling. So when you see Eko Atlantic or Banana Island or all of these things, these are also part of the historical process of filling in space in Lagos that dates from the 19th century. So part of what I want to think about in this work in progress that I'm doing is thinking about the legacy from that of a road that used to exist in Lagos called Reclamation Road. It's in the northwest, it was in the northwest part of Lagos. And this is a road that came about while the colonial government was reclaiming land and the swamp in Lagos. It does not exist anymore. Part of it is in Dosumu Street, part of it is on another street now. But for me, I've always found this really interesting because for this very brief moment in the 20th century, we see how Reclamation Road is actually taking up space that used to exist when Ijumago Lagoon was filled, when Isaladongo was filled. Reclamation Road was this sort of marker in space that helps us to remember that there used to be lagoons in this area. So part of what I want to think about in the work that I'm doing now, this work in progress, is rethinking the legacy of a road that, even though it no longer exists, was named and made to mark space that had been reclaimed. Well, I'll come back and talk about the lagoon in a second. But many people don't know that there used to be these very large lagoons and creeks all over Lagos Island. Because they've all been refilled now, we don't see them. But one of the things I talk about in my work is how water remembers. When we have flooding in Lagos Island, the water often comes back to where it used to be. So when you see some of the most waterlogged parts of Lagos Island, many of them are actually old spaces where there used to be lagoons, creeks, and swamps. But we'll come to that in a second, and hopefully I'll be able to show you. So part of what I've been thinking about in this new project is, so even though I'm usually a historian of the 19th century, I'm really thinking that, like I said, for this fleeting moment, Reclamation Road claimed space and showed us how the city itself was being reclaimed, but this is lost right now. So how does this lead us to streets? All right, I'll wait for my slides to catch up. I'm sorry, folks, but it's, yes. So I won't zoom in so as not to break anything. But part of what I do in my work, I'm really interested in maps and map making. And a lot of the things I do is really trying to, I always say this, people don't often recognize the old maps of Lagos, but one thing they will recognize is the sort of Google satellite map of Lagos. So part of what I do, and I hope I'll be able to show you how this works, is that I've drawn out and sketched out the old shoreline of Lagos. So Reclamation Road I'm talking about is right here where Jumago Lagoon used to be. I don't know if you can see that. But these two lagoons were reclaimed and all of this space was reclaimed. And it's funny, somebody told me a story a few months ago that his father told him that, oh, can they not hear me online? Oh, I just got a message of somebody, they can't hear me. So.
It's working fine.
Oh, it's working fine? Okay, very good. Because like I said, I do a lot of work with maps and map making and thinking about the city. Someone told me that his father, who I believe has passed on, told him that when he was younger, he used to go swimming in the lagoons in Northwest Lagos. And he was like, that's impossible. There are no lagoons. And I was like, actually, I didn't mean to say, well, actually, but one of the things we find when we look at old maps of Lagos and we look at the way that the city was reclaimed, that these old lagoons do show, and I'm sorry if you can't see the outline clearly, but in the Zoom version, you'll be able to see it there. But I'll show you a little bit about how we can reclaim these spaces, at least visually. Now, a lot of the reclamation in Lagos was taken up after the let's say starting around 1886. A lot of work that was done in the area I'm interested in was done by the Lagos Executive Development Board. I had some clippings here. of some of the work that they were doing and some of the protests. As you can imagine, a lot of people have written about the so-called idea of slum clearance. I have a lot of issues with the terminology, but it wasn't this idea that people were being moved out of Lagos and they had no response. There's a lot of protests, there's a lot of responses. There are a lot of different, one of the great things about doing the 20th century is, and then you can have more information, at least the earlier 20th century. There's a lot of information about people's responses, how they lived in these spaces, the economic possibilities of these lagoons, fishing. We used to have oysters, maybe we still do. There's so many things we used to have in these lagoons that are gone now because of the ways that the space was sandfilled. You can imagine there was cultural history, there was recreational histories, people would swim. There are all kinds of stories about leisure in Lagos from the 19th and 20th century. There's also, links to Orisha and how people would also worship. All of these things were embedded in the city. And so when we talk about slum clearance in quotes and fixing Lagos, it's actually a legacy of loss and disruption for a lot of people. So people think about colonialism often in terms of politics, but there's a real spatial, tangible sense of loss that happens in the city. How much time do I have? Like 5 minutes? Okay, I'll just zip through.
Yeah.
So usually I will talk about, my research questions is about 4 parts, but I will kind of move through very quickly. As a historian, I often will ask questions about the past. What traces do people leave where they live and they die? How can we understand the history of Lagos? When we think about streets and streeters, who are these people captured in these moments, these sort of snapshots of Lagos that come? This is a postcard from a photo series from around 1910, 1906, where this European photographer it seems that he rode the steam tramway through the city. And instead of staying on the marina, he went into the interior of the city and he took these photographs that we have. Some of them are around the areas that were reclaimed later. So it's a really important treasure trove for us. But I'll say I also have started asking questions about the present, because what happens is that I argue in my work is that the history of Lagos is present all around us, especially when we think about the archives that exist locally. If we think about Lagos as a city, I argue in my work that when we think about, what can the present tell us, right? I'm a historian. I was trained to start first in European archives. If you want to know anything about West Africa, you go to England, you go to the US, you go to France. This never sat well with me, right? This idea that I want to study Lagos, but somehow I have to start in Europe. And after doing the research for my work and actually walking in Lagos and walking in Lagos Island, I started thinking what are the traces we can find in the city of people's lives? And I was fortunate enough in thinking about Lagos to realize that the Lagos we have now, Lagos Island especially, is I argue that it's a wounded city, and these scars of slavery, freedom, economic collapse, political rivalry, all of these scars are visible in the city. And one of the ways that they're visible in the city, I'll skip, is in recognizing that the city is an archive of its own past. Around just before, maybe a few years before the pandemic, it'll catch up in a second, I realized walking in Lagos that we had this incredible set of street names. And doing more research, it turns out that these streets were named in 1868. Now, this does not mean that the names started in 1868, but this means that somebody created a record of the street names in 1868. And the reason that I discovered this is I was doing this project on the old steam tramway. I was doing this project on the old steam tramway that used to be in Lagos Island. And I was walking with my research partners in Lagos, and we came across one street called Inobere, which means in Yoruba, there's a lot of arguments about what the meanings are. It was Inobere, the fire started here. And we're walking, I was like, this is peculiar. I wonder what this means. So we kept walking and we got to another intersection, and and the street was called Inosa, the fire ended. And we were like, how curious is this? What does this mean? So when we started walking, we're like, okay, we made note of that. And then I started thinking, are the streets trying to tell me something about space? Is it possible we have an actual historical archive right where we are in the city? So I started with walking with my research partners. We started looking up and started trying to capture the street names that we found. And what we found was this incredible treasure trove, as I said, that dates back from 1868. And if you walk all over Lagos Island today, you will see there's an incredible record left of the street names, from the more popular ones to Tinubu to Breadfruit. Sometimes people will tell me stories about their families. I'll go see if I can find a record of their families. When I was back here in March, someone told me about their grandfather who was called Shete Olu, and he had this story of this narrative of being enslaved and coming back. And I was like, I'll go find it. So we still continue to search for these street names. And what you find is that these street names, they create a remarkable archive of space. They're not random. They're not unintentional. Actually, each of them, as you will see in the map that's next, tells us something about what is there. So in the book, I write about, and so in this map, you see a series of them, how I map them. Of course, there are more street names than there are still more that I'm looking for. I continue to find them all the time. I use historical maps to find them. I walk in the city to find them. But right now, I probably have maybe about 88 street names that we can date back before 1888 that were in use then. And of course, they begin to change over time. So one of the things I'm really fascinated by is the street names. So even though the street names that are in use in the past, some of them still linger, some of them are gone, but I'm really beginning to be interested in the ones that no longer exist, right? Maybe because the road has been changed or reconstructed, which is how we come back to Reclamation Road. I'll skip this part about how the book is about intersections, but to sort of round up what I'm doing, and this is not catching up because I think I'm out of time now. Oh, I have 3 minutes, 3 more minutes. Okay, very good. I'll let my slides catch up to where I am. Streeters, people walking in the streets, understanding their history. So just to give you, if you'll get there. Just a sense, I want to give you a sense of the lagoons that were reclaimed when we think about reclamation. Okay, very good. So this is northwestern Lagos Island. You can see there's Elegbata Creek in the extreme left, Alakoro Swamp, then Idubabo Lagoon, so large, looming large there. Ifeanyi Lagoon was right here in the bottom, which you can't see with my cursor. So Reclamation Road was really on this edge here. So as these lagoons begin to be reclaimed, we see how the streets change around this area. The next slide will show you that. So you see the map, you see Lagos Island, this corner begins to be filled in, and you see we're losing more and more over time. By 1926, we've lost the creeks on the edge, they've been filled in. By 1942, you see almost all the lagoons are entirely filled. I'm sorry if the detail is not so clear. Some of these maps are online on my website that you can see. But I'll just show you how we can find detail on our stop on this last slide. Suspense. Okay, so part of the things I do, I mentioned digital humanities. So part of what we can do with map working is that this is Lagos right now, contemporary Lagos. We can put the historical maps of Lagos from 1891 underneath this. So I can show you where this road used to be. It's showing on my screen. We'll see what happens there. So that cursor can move around and it'll show you the actual outline of space. I'm sorry it's stuttering, but if I were to turn my computer around, at least people here can see. So you can actually find and reclaim these spaces. Sorry for those online if it's not showing, but I do this for the whole of Lagos Island, but I've been really thinking about how to show people that, you're walking on a former lagoon, you're walking on a former creek in these parts of the city. So I usually will end this presentation. I'll skip through my slides. It'll skip through and it'll show you. I'm really interested in writing these stories in space. You see more clearly now what the shape of old Lagos is in the old space. I'm interested in the ways that we remember things, what we choose to remember in Lagos now and what we choose to forget, and how these spaces and how these old roads and streets can really help anchor us in space and tell the stories of these areas that used to exist and how people use these spaces, starting in at least the evidence that we have in the 1840s, 1850s up until now. So you won't find Reclamation Road now. What you will find is Dubamo Lagoon, Dostomu Street, all of these things that I've written over the space that used to exist. All right, thank you very much.
Thank you very, very much for that presentation. And I know you have questions, so please hold on. Let us move on to the next panelist, Abidin Amodu, who joins us from Australia. Amodu's paper, again, is entitled Whose Rights to the City? Street and Surveillance of Queer Bodies in Nigeria.
Okay, thank you very much. Do I get to share my slide from here? Is it from there?
No, it is being shared here on your behalf.
Okay, that's good. Okay. Next slide, please. Thank you very much. My name is Abidin Amodu, and the title of my presentation is Who's Right to City? Street and Surveillance of Queer Bodies in Nigeria. And next slide. So we would need to move really, really quickly across the slides. Um, Next slide. So because I'm in Australia at the moment, I'll quickly want to acknowledge the elders, past, present, and emerging, upon which the university. Okay. Please, can you hear me now?
Yes.
Yes.
Okay. Very, very good. So, for accessibility concerns, I am a young black man with short hair. So if you cannot see me, you can hear my voice. Before we continue, I would like to issue this trigger warning. Some of the contents of this slide might be explicit and triggering for some people. So I enjoin us to take action. So over the years, we know many studies in Nigeria have shown us that there is queer hostility towards queerness in Nigeria and in most part of Africa, as in Uganda, in Egypt, in Zimbabwe, and many other places like that. In Nigeria, we have the SSMPA, the Same-Sex and Marriage Prohibition Act, which promises gay people or queer people up to 14 years imprisonment and which has also led to a number of states and non-state sanctioned violence towards queer people. There's also led to abuse and can you hear me?
Yes, we can hear you.
Oh, okay, okay. Thank you very much. So my work basically is based on Henry Lefebvre's Right to City, where I am talking about the right to city. So one of the major arguments that Lefebvre made in his symbolic work is that urban life should prioritize inclusion over economic and ideological interest, and that public spaces must be accessible to all, including marginalized groups. In the context of this research, which is very much ongoing and part of a bigger project, is that queer people, that is members of the LGBTQIA plus community, are regarded as sexual minorities just almost all across the world. And in Nigeria, where there are stringent laws, cultural barriers, and other institutional barriers against the expression of same-sex desires and sexualities, most queer people or all queer people face these problems. And these problems is that at the end of the day, or the long and short of it is that they are usually systematically or directly excluded from accessing urban areas or urban spaces. In the former work, I had already conceptualized queer spaces in Nigeria because of the restrictions in the mainstream space. Queer people have sort of like created their own space. And if we look at square spaces generally, we have it in two ways. You said we have the physical space and the virtual space. And street comes down to, if we could look at the left side of the diagram, street comes down to under community and counter public space. We already have the semi-private or the shared space. We have the personal space or the private space, and we have this community or shared space. That is where street comes in. And moving on, there is always the struggle for space because one of the things that defines the the existence of human beings is the struggle for power. And when there is struggle for power, there is also the struggle for space and the struggle to reclaim space. And the major actors in this struggle are the state, religious institutions, and the general public. So we'll get to that. What does the state do? Because the state is the state has the right to, has the ability to impose laws or perhaps formulate policies and make decisions that restrict the expression of sexuality and sexual orientations that are non-heteronormative. And religious institutions will fall back on religious texts and doctrines to they fall back on religious texts and doctrines to police sexuality. And as we already know, when Christians, Muslims, or even traditional worshippers in Nigeria, who are the main people, religious gatherings, they would almost like fall back on the Bible or the Quran and the anti-homosexuality narrative. And the general public would originally draw from culture and draw from other negative experiences with people of queer people and use that as barriers or use that as indicators to claim space that and in the process of claiming space, they tend to erase the the presence of queer people. So go straight to the methods. Like I mentioned earlier, this research is part of an often enacted through institutional, social, spatial practices that reinforce heteronormativity and cisnormativity. Excuse me, it's really cold here. So, moving on, what the surveillance of queer bodies really talks about is that we've already structured society based on power relations that allows us to see anything outside of heterosexuality or cis-normativity that's been biologically conforming to binary gender structures that is male and female or being heteronormative. And anything outside of that spectrum, anything outside of that space is frowned upon and is policed. Legal surveillance relates to the aspects of law, such as the SSMPA, the Sharia law, and different legislations that are coming up all around Nigeria to ensure that the expression of same-sex sexualities is policed and repressed. We have digital surveillance, but before we go to digital surveillance, let's quickly look at social or family surveillance. We have social institutions like religion, schools, or even pressure groups coming up with different agenda to repress same-sex sexual expressions. Then we have the internalized surveillance, which relates to queer people themselves who have internalized homophobia, and they sort of like, okay, I don't want to express myself too much. I don't want to let people know why this could be part of the ethics of care and self-help. It sometimes overstretches and becomes a sort of internalized surveillance of bodies. Then we have the digital space. The digital space it's a very dicey space because a lot of things happen simultaneously in the digital space. While people who are anti-LGBTQI would use the space, LGBTQI people to have created their own spaces within the online space, and both spaces coexist on the online platforms, and sometimes they intersect. So surveillance and the street. Street is inherently public, but not equally accessible. If you look at this picture, this is the picture of a Nigerian trans woman, Chantel, who was also known as Area Mama of Abuja. And she was found murdered on August 8th, 2024. She was found murdered and naked. And there hasn't been any prosecution, there hasn't been any findings about or investigations about the cause of her death. And why really have to include the display of amorous relationships as the legislation spells out for it. We have social media now. So even if people are able to display these amorous relationships and the social media algorithm shows it to the people in Nigeria, it has already crossed the Nigerian border. It is already within Nigeria. And for this person, Chantel was murdered. Chantel pride was like priding herself as a sex worker in Abuja. And oftentimes we would see cases like this. Not all these cases would lead to death or grievous bodily harm, but most of the times people face discrimination, they face violence from community vigilantes, neighbors, and sometimes queer people are even denied housing. Um, Last year there was a trans Nigerian woman who I spoke with. She had gotten an apartment in Lagos. She was living in Lagos, living really fine. Then one day, one of her neighbors decided to like out her and make a public spectacle of her. So the landlord had to evict her from the apartment, and that she was a disease, and being trans is a contagious disease for at least according to what the landlord thinks. And
So our reception.
they took my phone, first to unlock it, and found proof of my homosexuality. They poked my anus with sticks in the mock penetration. That was just like the sort of dehumanizing, the very inhuman experiences, dehumanizing experiences that queer people or LGBTQI people are subjected to in Nigeria, and how they are usually denied space. Okay, let's wait for my slide to catch up. You see in this slide, you also have, I can see three pictures. The one on the right is a screenshot from a very old video from about 2018, when the person here, James Brown, who is a popular Nigerian cross-dresser, was arrested at Royal Vintage Hotel in Ikorodu, Lagos, Nigeria, where they were accused of organizing a gay initiation party. And that was where we had the very famous quote, "They didn't cut me," and which is what the law says, that you have to be like caught in the hat, and they had to be prosecuted. They were brought before the magistrate in Lagos, and the case was dismissed after about a month in hearing. Then we also have cases of Keto. Keto is an expression for anti-LGBTQ people, although it has been argued and sometimes proven that some of them are also members of the LGBTQ community in Lagos. They sort of like go after queer men, especially, or GBMSM, gay and bisexual men who have sex with men. They go after them, and usually through infiltrating their online spaces like dating apps like Grindr and Tinder and Bumble. And the post as gay men, and in the course of connecting, they set them up, take their money, beat them up, drop them somewhere. And because of the stringent laws that represses the expression of sexuality, many of these crimes, even though they are a clear violation of human rights, they cannot be reported because the system does not allow for that reportage. And so many of these crimes go unpunished, and queer Nigerians just have to like live every day in that precarity. Then we have other forms of surveillance. This picture, we are North, we don't support LGBTQ, is one of the trends that happened on Twitter, now X, some
No,
years
5 more
back, when
minutes.
there was this okay, thank you. When there was this uprisings regarding the LGBTQ people. And one of a very important study that has looked at it is Arewa against LGBTQ discourse by Paul Ononuga, where he explored the discourse on Twitter and how ideologies are being framed, then
it's better at the time. Right.
We have two bars.
I think it's there.
Wait, is that? Oh, okay.
Okay, Abidin, I think what we are proposing to do is to have you continue if you can, but if you can't, move on to the next panelist and save you 5 minutes for after the next panelist who's in person here.
okay, I actually concluded. Could you please put me on the spot where you stopped getting what I was saying?
I think that would be at the point, yes.
The North against
The North, yes. The North, yes. The North, yes.
Here?
Okay.
The next slide.
Okay. Okay. Let me quickly do this in 3 minutes. Can you hear me, please?
Yes, please.
Okay, thank you very much. I said we just want to exist, reclaiming the right to city. So, here we have these are pictures taken from the NSAS protest that happened in Nigeria that ended catastrophically on October 2020. So one of the issues was that when queer Nigerians joined the protest and they raised placards like Queer Lives Matter to end SARS um and they said no, queer people queer people experience police brutality, queer people experience police brutality more than straight people. A straight person who is could might not be stopped and searched, while a queer person or a feminine presenting man or a masculine presenting woman might be searched, and this has led to extortion, violence, grievous bodily harms against queer people in Nigeria. And while this protest was going on, the non-queer people were like, no, you can't be part of us, and it's sort of like led that very day. So what I'm trying to say is that what I'm trying to say is that over time, non-queer people and queer people have been finding it very difficult to coexist in the same space, even though they both have the right to sit, they both have the right to exist. So as part of this initiative, we have organizations that are like strengthening queer visibility, helping minority groups to reclaim their rights, such as Obodo, the Initiative for Equal Health and Rights, Minority Watch, and SEQHR. So what these organizations do basically is to provide healthcare support. They provide housing support, safe housing support. They provide legal representation and other related services that might have been denied to queer people in the mainstream. So, and that might have been, denied of queer people in the mainstream, like the housing thing we talked about. The trans woman is being represented in court, and Minority Watch is currently on another case of a queer Nigerian man who was subjected to HIV testing, which is very much illegal in Nigeria. And the case is still ongoing because although judgment was delivered, but it has been appealed very recently and is still ongoing. So basically, what I'm trying to say in essence is that in Lagos, where there is heteronormativity and erasure of queer bodies, what would the power structures, legal structures, social structures, institutional structures tend to erase queer bodies, queer histories from the mainstream. And if you look at most studies about Lagos or most studies on Lagos, whether from history, geography, or any discipline, there is usually queer people or queer bodies in this space. And these people are part of streeters. They are part of people who operate the street. They are part of the people who keep these cities alive and going. But because of the culture and the negative reception of homosexuality, they are often erased. So my aim is to bring this discourse to the fore and advocate for the inclusion of queer people in histories and protest erasure and reclaim queer rights and presence. Thank you very much.
Thank you very much. Thank you so much. And I will proceed without much ado to the final speaker today, Bankole Wright. Okay.
Yes, stop sharing.
All right, good morning, everyone. My presentation is titled Beyond Perilous Masculinities, Rethinking Urban Male Streeters. And this study emerged from my ongoing ethnographic fieldwork in Oshodi, Lagos, Nigeria, where I study street life, working with informal transport workers, union members, and other informal urban actors associated with them, such as the street vendors. Next slide, please. So popular and next slide, please. Yeah, so popular and academic discourse usually cast informal transport union workers. That's precisely the NURTW workers, as popularly known as agberos, as thugs and or area boys, which has reinforced what scholars call perilous masculinity, a lens that fixates on violence and threats. But in my fieldwork, I noticed something the peril narrative misses. That's the constant joking, teasing, and small acts of mutual care that make the park livable. It is within this observation that I argue that these urban street men wield humor and affect as urban tools. Next slide. And then I ask some questions. Next slide. I think I missed something. Next one. Oh yes. So I ask, how do urban streeters perform masculinities beyond violence that we have been so much acclaimed to? And what relational practices sustain mobility and community in Oshodi? Please, can we move to the methodology? Yeah, methodology. Help me. Help me that. Yes. So, like I said, my research is based on an ongoing 9 months of ethnographic fieldwork in Oshodi, where I engaged in participant observation across motor parks and bus stops, where I move alongside my knowledge producers, as I like to call them, as they worked, negotiated, and performed daily labor as transport workers. My fieldwork combined observation with informal conversational interview conducted during their everyday activities, which I call conversational ethnography, because because of the spontaneity that characterized that space and even the streeters as individuals, I had to adopt another kind of methodology whereby I just have the mic with their knowledge and then I just meet them in their natural space. And so sometimes in some of the audios, you would hear them calling out to passengers, doing other things while they respond to me. So I just keep following them because I observe that when they are very conscious of the fact that I'm interviewing them, it's sort of like tampers with the data and they become extra performative and they curate the kind of responses that I get. So that also influenced the emergence of the conversational ethnography that I deploy. The theoretical path, please. Next slide, please. Theoretical path. Yes. So the literature on urban street masculinity, especially in criminology and sociology, often presents masculinity as a dangerous, aggressive, and hypermasculine phenomenon. Scholars like James Messerschmidt, for instance, links crime to masculine performance when other status routes are blocked. Elijah Anderson's Code of the Street similarly shows how toughness becomes a survival code. Albert Lobo de la Terra, who framed the concept of perilous masculinity, defines it as built on scheming, misogyny, and violence. It critiques the works of Goffman, Rios, and Contreras for reproducing one-dimensional portrayal of marginalized men. However, my work built on this critique but pushes further through ethnographic fieldwork in Oshodi. I show that street men perform relational, affective, and humorous masculinities. I draw from R.W. Cornell's idea of multiple masculinities and Simo's notion of people as infrastructure to argue that these treatments sustain sustain the urban through improvisation. In this way, I move beyond peril to theorize what I call street-based relational masculinity. And now let's leave next slide. Now let's turn to two key ethnographic experience from two motor parks in Oshodi. And before that, I would just like to play an audio to just sort of like provide a context. So what you might first hear in your mind might be chaos, but there's a lot going on here in terms of the conversation going on within this space and within this space. Yeah, I'll just so so please next slide. Yeah, so this is this is one of the spaces called Germany Park. This one is called Saudi, and this is where these guys operate, and this is where they stay. Next one, please. Yes, and this is also Saudi. Do you think you can play that video? Is it? Yeah. All right. I'll try to be fast. So first, in Germany Park, I observed the makeshift umbrella space. Now this is another park which is called Surutu, where any LTW members, drivers, conductors, and parking attendants gather daily. Some selling cigarettes and a female vendor, some selling cigarettes and alcohol, while others selling other things. Right? They engage in banter, cussing, flirtations, and joking. These women in that space don't retreat. They participate, they laugh, they linger. Rather than reading this as harassment or dominance, I interpret it as a form of co-performed gendered sociability. Masculinity here is not about threats, but about wit, rhythm, and presence. It's a shared language of the street that sustains social relations. And then I moved to another park at Surutu Junction, where Agberos direct traffic. Now, this is Surutu Junction, where Agberos direct traffic and collect fees. I observed a similar pattern. These men joke with female traders, make playful comments about manhood and sexuality. Again, these men haven't just throwaway moments. They show how masculinity is performed linguistically, affectively, and socially through humor, exaggeration, and verbal play. Across both sides, what emerges is a masculinity that is relational and performative, not fixed or inherently perilous. These men use language, laughter, and ritualized teasing to produce social cohesion, claim space, and perform selfhood under precarious conditions. Humor becomes effective infrastructure. a tool of survival and sociability in everyday urban life. Now, I'll just take one. Please, can you put yes, the thing, yeah. So the first one, humor as affective and social infrastructure. In Germany Motor Park, I observed the daily, of course, like I said, these aren't just idle chatter. It's a form of emotional regulation and social maintenance in a high stress, fast-paced urban space like Oshodi. Humor becomes affective infrastructure, a way to create belonging, manage tension, and build informal community. This challenges the stereotype of the street as purely violent or threatening. Yeah, masculinity is performed through with familiarity and rhythm, not brutality. And then I also observed about how gender is co-produced in the streets. Now, through the shared jokes, the banter, the mutual teasing, men and women produce a gendered street culture that is fluid, humorous, and dynamic. These moments complicate the idea that masculinity on the street is always oppressive. Instead, we see a form of relational masculinity, one that depends on the presence, engagement, and response of others. This co-performance breaks down the binary of dominant, submissive, masculinity or gendered relations, and asks us to see street gender as interactive and negotiated. And then the last one, slang and speech as masculine street capital. At Surutu Junction and equally other junctions, language plays a central role in how masculinity is performed and social power is asserted. Agberos use creative slangs. One that stands out is the use of the word jogger. While we see someone who is quite drunk or high as scary, they joke they joke about the person, and it's more very relational. And then what is most important is how they approach what we would consider serious. It's the humor behind what we would consider serious. And these words, these aren't just words, they are kind of street capital. Knowing the right slang and when to use it, how to flip it into a joke, these are forms of performative street intelligence. Slang functions as a linguistic infrastructure, structuring social access, respect, and mobility in the park. Of course, after spending some time with them, I began to use the similar slangs that they use. And of course, in that video, you could hear me asking questions like, what does this slang mean? And then, in that is actually interview, but it doesn't come off as though I'm trying to question them, I'm trying to interview them in the formal way we think of semi-structured. These questions emerge from conversation in that sense. Yeah. Through speech, street men not only build identity, they also build space. This is how masculinity is woven into the city's soundscape and rhythm. It's a form of linguistic labor that animates street culture. I conclude by saying this work invites us to rethink how we understand masculinity on the African street, not as inherently perilous or pathological, but as a relational, affective, and performative practice through humor, slang, teasing, and co-presence. The men I call urban streeters build social cohesion, assert identity, and sustain the rhythms of Lagos everyday life. These practices, though often dismissed as noise or nuisance, like I just played, what you might find when you get into that space, you'll be like, this is noisy, right? Or why are these guys constituting nuisance, right? Are in fact crucial to how the city works. They review how gender, labor, and infrastructure are performed from below in ways that unsettle dominant narratives of violence and disorder in the streets. By centering these everyday moments, we begin to see how the African street is not just a site of chaos, but as a space of cultural production, improvisation, and deeply human connection. And I just want to say and emphasize that I am not the first to talk about urban improvisation. Professor Tolo Akiwale has also talked about urban improvisation in his work. So I draw also from his work to understand the concept of urban improvisation on the streets. Thank you.
Thank you very much. This will agree has been a series of stimulating presentations. And now we'll open it up to questions from you members of the audience. I think we have 10 to 15 minutes for questions. So I see a hand here. I see another hand over there. And the third question. So I'll take 3 questions now. Our panelists respond to those questions. We have some time. We'll take more questions and have them speak to them. We'll go first.
So mine is I have the question I think about and like an observation for the work. First, I want to ask that did you look into like classism in the way masculinity is from urban street life at the The reason why I'm saying this is because Agbero has formed an integral part of the way Lagos urban life has been fashioned. Why I'm saying this is because now we I don't know if you've been hearing of one chance bus or something, but I will tell you categorically that on those roads that have this active Agbero activity, like the axis and all, you don't find such situation in those roads. And the reason is because there's active participation of these people on the road. Yes. So they form like a kind of orderliness. Don't let us forget that there is always a leader in every junction. So I want to look into that classism there because there's always classes on people on the street. Another thing I want to show is that you were saying something about the repositioning Agbero as showing how street performance shape and sustain Lagos everyday life. Now, there's something I really want to talk about.
I don't know because of time. Let me ask a question.
Okay, so my question is that how do you want to extricate violence from those Agberos? Because there are 2 different parts. Those Agberos are not one doing violent side of it because they usually come back there every day to come and get their money. And I don't know what I'm trying to say. So how can you to extricate them from those that are causing violence on that axis?
Thank you very much for that question. Next.
Okay, thank you very much. I mean, I did before. Did you say you came up with the conversational ethnography, or you are working after someone who has done that?
Yeah, it's
Part of the methodology.
yes. You said no, not my idea. Sorry,
Okay,
not my idea.
Now, beautiful. The presentation brought to me, if anybody has seen Gangs of Lagos, I don't remember some scenes in that film, and I felt this is a brilliant initiative. Yes, the streets are always platforms of performance every day, but the street has its own rhythm. Slang is everything, yes. But my question is, I did not see any of the visuals showing us where there's enjoying Indian hemp or whatever, but you mentioned it. And that's part of the streets, if you want to agree with me. And Surutu junction, Surutu is violence or problem. So that means it's implied that junction that you say you went to is actually a point of violence and what have you. I think the work we do well, if you can show us, not just the same in quotes aspect of the streets, but also include the insane. Whether you like it or not, I mean, from what you have shown us on the visuals and the rest of it, we didn't see the other side. maybe because you are a participant observer, we are part of. And this character that has, SOBO behind this costume, was he aware that there was the camera?
Oh, yes, yes, he was.
Okay, so why did he give us?
He was the one who did.
Was it deliberate?
Yes, it was intentional.
He didn't want to give us.
No. He wasn't backing me. He wanted me to snap. He wanted me to snap the cloth.
Okay, what was?
Yes.
Okay. So that my question is just about that the flip side of sanity on the street have shown us.
Yeah.
Thank you very much. Thank you. Next question here. I'll come back.
Thanks a lot about observation. Yes, when you talk about this, there is an important thing that I also think is possible. Their relationship with even the passengers, especially if you're on a particular route and these people know you. There's a way they treat you that if you're even if there's no problem, say, auntie, wait, one bus is coming like the best 10 minutes. And when that bus comes, if there are other people that then we ensure that you get it when you're that person because they have built a relationship with you. Then there is also this thing that if you are a normal computer group, you start also to speak their language. I entered Lagos and one conductor will say so I say, my watching, the moment I spoke like that, it changed. Then by the time I finished, he was one carrying my bag. Every meeting go out there, get the next person. So there's the way that this relationship will be with them. If you also speak their language, but they know you as a normal computer, and that's part of what's going on in the streets.
Yeah. Thank you very much. So this round of questions are directed at Bankole, right? And to summarize, I think I hear two distinct strains in those questions. First, how do you account for class or hierarchy? Okay, we'll come back to it in the next round. How do you account for class or hierarchy on the among the streeters that you observed? And the other question is, can we write out peril from our account of this man?
Yes. So, do I respond now?
Yes, please.
Okay, I think that's a question for me.
Yeah, we'll take it.
Okay, so the first question, which is
Class or
class,
hierarchy.
yes. So of course there is class in that space, and one of the things I observe is that whenever they are in the space of familiarity, I'll use the word sociality. When they are in the space of sociality, there is little consciousness of class. Little consciousness of class. And that is because of the kind of environment they build. There is obviously class structure in the NLTW. There are officers who are their chairmen who are in the office, and even those on the streets, they are parking attendants, they are shadow boys, right? And I'm not just talking about them alone. I'm also bringing them in conversation with drivers, conductors, and street trader. How I speak about sociality is not just within the context of the NLTW. It's also within the context of conductors and drivers. The kind of social activity that emerged, that goes on there. And this is something that has been built over time. It is something that is created in that particular space, which is why one of the things I observed when I spoke to the streets vendors, I observed that the fact that they have a particular spot along that space is always as a result of the direct relationship they have with one of the members of the NLTW. You hear conversations like, oh, I got here because this person, I know this person, and he was like, you stay here. So this kind of relational, this kind of relations has also informed the kind of social context that they have built over time. And I don't know if that answered your question. And then the second one, so my paper does not set out to take away peril. I do not argue that there is no peril. That's not my argument. My argument is that's why I titled it Beyond Perilous Masculinity. So I invite us to see beyond that. Now, seeing beyond that does not, I'm not asking us to have deliberate amnesia, no. Or I'm not asking us to say that it doesn't exist. It does exist. And even this violence, because I remember last year's LSA, Professor Shomoton asked me, right, to also look at how the violence can be contextualized. And this is something that I've also seen, because what we see is violence, but there are various contexts to the violence that we see, right? But that's not even the case here. The case here is the fact that I am not writing off violence. I am only trying to foreground humor and foreground another kind of reality that exists in that space that scholars need to begin to look at.
Thank you. Thank you very much for attending to those questions very quickly. We'll go on to the next and final round of questions, I think, because of the time that we have. But I'll play my moderator card first and come back to you. I have a question for Dr. Delucia. I very much enjoyed your presentation, and what it brought to my mind are the public buses, the yellow public buses. That's the focus of my research, and the murals of fishermen and water-related activities on those buses. And I was wondering if there's any connection between that sort of representation, because when I talked to one of the people I talked to said that these might be by artists originally from Lagos Island. And I wonder if you found anything in that that might help me make that connection, that and the sort of special story you're telling about Lagos. So that's my moderator card. We'll take you and you, sir.
There's a question online.
And then we'll add a question.
Thank you so much. Well, first question to the media. Thank you. I can't wait to read your book now. I have a quick question about the methodology of walking cartography. Can you talk a little bit more about what walking has to do with it, particularly in of mine? And a quick question to Bangla: how self-aware are young developers of their own masculinity? Like, can they talk about it, or what is your opinion?
And you're next.
Okay, so I think yes, that was when he raised that was when I raised my hand. I think yes.
Yeah, that's it. Thank you so much. So could you? Okay. So a lot of questions. Yes.
Thank you very much for your talk. I'm urban geographer and public space and emotional damage to space. So all of your three presenters really resonate with my work. Thank you for that. The first question that we made it good to add in. I was wondering if you also work on semi-public space because of safety issues. So I was wondering how you integrate that kind of space. And then it's more a reference and a comment. I don't know if you know a book called The Politics of Place Naming that will call by geographers. So maybe you'd be interested into that. And but maybe for another research or I was also wondering, how a question about masculinity works outside Lagos, in other settings. And if you know that Humanitas works, working on masculinity and masculinity, but so maybe you will be interested.
Great. You said you have a question.
Oh, it was a similar question.
Great. Could you please read the question on?
Okay, for one question, on the presentation, you mentioned that sometimes what happened in Kapa, men and women isn't necessarily harassment, but could be seen as play. So how do you draw the line between what's play and what's problematic? And how is it addressed in situation when it's identified as harassment?
Okay, great questions, all. If you could attend to those questions very briefly. We will start with panelists who are in person and come over to Aberdeen.
Well, we have 2 minutes, so I'll say very quickly. Yes, I have meant to read that book. Walking cartography is basically a way of, because I'm a historian and the work I do is very isolating, I realized I had to leave the archive and actually be in the city, kind of like the anthropologists, and really try to engage with the city itself, as I said, as an archive. So it's really a process of embodied, so I guess sort of embodied map making and making sure to capture the resonances where history and the contemporary period, where they intersect, and even where they don't agree. So it's really a way of bringing the map making into the streets and making it recognizable, and also walking with people who want to see this history as well. Because a lot of us growing up in Lagos grew up without having history classes and not even understanding that our history is right in front of us. You don't have to go somewhere else. And I'll answer your question after.
All right.
So 30 seconds.
Okay, so how self-aware are they of their masculinity? Well, I would say that I don't think I can quantify it, because one of the arguments I've made here is that masculinity is relational. And this different performance of masculinity emerges based on various contexts, which I have very well tried to explain here. Now, the second question on the question of harassment, right? One of the things I've observed is, which is very important to my work, is that there are no. I have spent almost 9 months on the field, and I can boldly say that I have not seen a silent woman on the streets. When I mean I have not seen, I mean a woman who do not have the capacity to express herself, who do not have agency within that space. I have seen women who would speak up towards, for instance, harassment, inconvenience. In fact, there are women, which was one of the things I talked about in my first presentation on women as infrastructure. The people that I have observed so far seem to have this agent, women precisely, seem to have this agency that subverts what we know about silent women. And then it's very surprising. And I also work with a particular woman, female conductor, who what one might think is that this woman will be silent, she's just going to do her work, she'll be cheated and all of that. But this lady is one of the ladies in that space that speaks up so much. And whenever, for instance, we may have agberos who may want to take drinks, alcohol, and then sort of like joke with the sellers, like later. I've seen moments when the ladies will come here, will be missing, and then they will have to like and then that kind of conversation does not give room for. I would say it gives room for minimal harassment.
All right. I'll stop you on that note because you're in person, so we can hear from Aberdeen. Aberdeen, you have 1 minute only because our audience is gracious.
Okay, thank you very much. I believe the question was about semi-public spaces. In Lagos, where I've lived for most part of my life, and I can tell you categorically that the places I refer to as semi-public spaces are spaces that both queer and non-queer people exist in these spaces openly but clandestinely. What does this mean? It means that there are places for privacy reasons, I'm not going to mention them, even very close to you, down there at the University of Lagos. But you have to be queer, or you have to be able to understand beyond the surface to be able to identify that this is a queer space. On a normal day, if you have a hotel or a bar, for instance, you have straight people enjoying their life, having their drink, and you have queer people within that same space. It is not entirely private. It is not entirely public. It is a shared space. But then it is only the queer party who is aware that they are sharing the space with the non-queer party. But the non-queer party does not understand or see beyond that surface that they are sharing that same space with the queer people. So it is just the way it is. That is why I refer to those spaces as semi-public. It is neither entirely public nor entirely private. It is
And that
mutually
is-
shared.
that
But it's
is
just
the-
that one party don't know about.
I think that's a wonderful point to ask the audience to give you a warm round of applause. And a warm round of applause.
Thank you.
Well, thank you so very much for your time. Thank you for being part of this.